Hi, another movie I watched last weekend was Jackie, Pablo Larraín's film about Jackie Kennedy in the days following her husband's assassination in 1963. Natalie Portman plays the former Jacqueline Bouvier, who was traumatized by the sudden death of her husband, shot dead in the back of the car as they were driving through Dallas in Texas. And she goes through the following days trying to organize her husband's funeral, the events surrounding it, while Lyndon Johnson takes control of the American government and is keen to move into the White House before the decorators can step in and Kennedy can oversee her family being moved out, whilst also being helped by her husband's younger brother Bobby, played by Peter Sarsgaard. I very much enjoyed Lorraine's later film, Spencer, about Princess Diana and a heavily fictionalized take on her last Christmas as a member of the royal family. And this is definitely a companion piece to that, although obviously this film came first. But I found it to be far weaker, and I think the main reason is the script. Spencer was written by Stephen Knight, hugely experienced dramatist. This film is by Noah Oppenheim, whose other credits are largely as an executive for television news. It's an oddly superficial story. We find out very little about Jackie, and she seems herself to be quite a superficial person. Although the film is about her situation and her environment after the assassination, and it's narrated in retrospect a week later as she meets with a journalist, we find out very little about the forces surrounding her, what is shaping her, her inner life. She is seemingly obsessed with her husband's memory and trying to organize the most lavish send off that she possibly can, despite objections from others that a large state funeral attracting figures from all over the world could be a magnet for further assassinations. But we never find out what drives Jackie. We never find out the core of her. There's so little um, material about her inner self that it's very hard to gain a foothold on what the movie is supposed to be about. The key to drama is conflict. It's very hard to have a drama that doesn't have some kind of conflict on some level, even down to two people sitting at dinner talking. My Dinner with Andre, the least dramatic film of all time, is nevertheless about conflict because these two men having dinner have different ideas about things, and in the most civil terms possible, it's a film about an argument, a verbal conflict. Here we have Jackie being buffeted between different sides, between her sympathetic brother in law, between the more practically minded um, figures of the incoming Johnson administration and Johnson's own fixer, Jack Valenti. Um, but there's no. She is such a passive figure. There's so little background as to why this situation exists that it's very hard to care. Um, I think Portman's performance is generally quite strong, but she's playing such a passive, shallow character. It's really difficult to become that concerned about what's happening. She's not particularly interesting in and of herself. There are strong performances elsewhere. We have Peter Sarsgaard, as I said, as Bobby, a senior aide played by Richard E. Grant, sporting an extremely wobbly American accent. Um, Greta Gerwig has a notable role as Jackie's assistant, and Billy Crudup as the reporter is very good in his scenes, and there's a nice tension there. John Hurt also appears, and I think what was his final film as a priest, with whom Jackie has a recurring conversation, which ties in with the rest of the story at the end of the film. And although there are individually interesting scenes, it's well directed, it's well acted, the script is the core of everything, and that core is not sufficiently interesting. There's a lack of understanding as to, I think, what makes a strong story. Spencer worked because it had that central conflict of Diana against this environment and the pressure that it was putting on her. And that situation doesn't exist in the same way here, and it's really not clear as to what we're supposed to be focusing on as the source of any drama. Yes, Jackie had been through something absolutely horrifying, but sort of watching someone uh, working their way through a traumatic event like that, it's hard to see what the film's supposed to be about. It really lionizes the idea of the Kennedy White House as a Camelot. The musical Camelot recurs throughout the stories. It was one of Kennedy's favorites. But the idea that it was some shining castle on the hill seems to go completely unquestioned. And of course, now we know that that was largely a public relations fantasy. As a result, this film looks weirdly old fashioned and very shallow. It's really, aside from Lorraine's stylistic um, input, it feels much more like something you would see in a miniseries. Um, and as a result, it's really not something that I could recommend, and it's really not that good.